Hello guys, and welcome to part 2 of our donut modeling tutorial, our highly illegal donut modeling tutorial in Maya. So last we left off, we'd created the icing and the base donut shape. We've given it some droopy droopies and a bit of wobble. I've gone ahead and added in a little bit more wobble just to break up some of these straight lines, just using the same soft selection that we were using before. But in this episode, what we're going to do is go ahead and actually add some sprinkles on top. So before we do that, we're currently in smooth preview with this. We press 3 on the keyboard. I'm going to press 1 just to take that out. And I'm going to subdivide this one more time just to lock in that shape. Again, the same with the donut. We want to keep the subdivision levels the same across both of them. Just makes it easier to work with. So once we've done that, let's go ahead and start making some sprinkles. So these are the specific kind of sprinkles that we're going to make, and you can see they come in various different colors, but we'll get to that later. But they also come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. We've got the kind of these long, thin ones, some shorter ones. We've also got this squiggly banana-looking boy here that we'll probably do. So what we're going to do is we'll start out just by creating one sprinkle. For the time being, we'll just come to our outliner, select both of these, and press H just to hide those, and then we will create a sprinkle. So we're going to go ahead and create a cylinder. By default, when you create a cylinder, if I come to the channel box editor, it's going to have around 20 divisions unless you've changed it. This we could get away with, but it's going to be a little bit high considering we're going to have a lot of sprinkles. We don't really want this to be a huge amount. So we're just going to go ahead and do 8 subdivisions for the time being. It's much more manageable, much more reasonable, won't slow your scene down as much. What we're also going to do is just use the rotate tool, and I'm going to hold down J so that angle snaps just to rotate that 90 degrees so it lies flat. Okay? And then, again, we're going to use the scale tool, and I'm just going to make that a little bit longer, like so. So that's our first sprinkle. Currently, it's very, very large, though. So I'm going to go ahead and do Modify, Freeze Transforms, just to reset all of this. And I'm going to reduce the scale. If I Shift select all of these in the channel box, we can change them all at once. I'm going to change this down to something like 0.1. Okay, we might need to scale that down again later, but for the time being, that'll be okay. Then let's just freeze the transforms on that again. The other thing that we can change is, right now you can see this looks very, very angular. So we obviously want this to be smooth, right, and round. So we're going to go ahead and go to the edge selection mode in the modeling toolkit. Just select all these edges, then come up to mesh display and soften edge, just to soften those normals a little bit. Okay, so this is our long one. Let's go ahead and create a short one as well. It's real nice and easy, just scaling down these cylinders. And then we'll also create a curved one. So the best way to do this is we'll just copy the long one that we have. We're going to use the multi-cut tool, and I'm going to hold down Control and a middle mouse click just to add one in the middle. Again, another one here, and again, another one here, and then maybe we'll add a few more just in between. The middle mouse click, when you're holding down Control, allows you to place them evenly distributed, instead of having to eyeball it. So once we've added a few edge loops, we're going to come up to Deform. We're going to go to non-linear and then bend. It's going to bring up this handle here. What we want to do is go to the rotate tool and just rotate this so it lies flat with your cylinder. If you can't see it anymore, that's okay. It is still there. We can press 4 on the keyboard to go into wireframe mode. You can see that it is still in there in the cylinder. Okay. We're then going to go back to the channel box layer editor, and you can see now we have this new input down here. Input down here called bend, and we have a curvature input here. So if I just select that, and maybe let's just type in 1. Okay, you can see that does a little bit, but not a whole lot. If you instead just click on here and hold down middle mouse click and then drag from left to right, you can see it's now bending, kind of like this, right? It's like a floppy fish. We want to add a bit of bend to this. So right now it's bending up in this direction, which is okay, but I want it to bend this way instead, right? Lying flat. So we'll just rotate this again in the Y-axis this time. Hold down J to angle snap that, and we'll just rotate it until the X-axis is pointing up. You can see here as well on the right, we've got 90 and 90 in Y. So now if we do the curvature, it's going that way. So we'll just go ahead and do maybe something like 60% there. And once you're happy with that, come back to Modify, go to Freeze Transforms, or sorry, before that, go to Edit, Delete All by Type History, just to clear that deformation, and go Modify and then Freeze Transforms. Okay. So make sure all the transforms on these guys are frozen, and we're just going to bring them all back to the center of the grid. Okay, holding down X to snap those, and then we'll just freeze those transforms again before we do anything else. Okay, so I'm going to unhide the donut and the icing. Okay, And I'm just pressing 4 again to go into wireframe mode. You can see we have our sprinkles down there. They look around about a decent size, so I'm not too unhappy about that. Then what we're going to do next is we're going to distribute them on the donut. And you might be thinking, how do we do that? You know, am I going to have to drag these up and then place these all manually, like so, and then like Control D and duplicate, and then turn around like this and so on. And we could do that, but then we'd be here for a million years, and no one wants to do that, right? Unless you're absurdly patient, but I'm not. So there's a much easier way that we can do this. Okay, and we're going to use something called Mesh, which you can find in a little tab over here. If you don't have this tab, come to Windows, go to Settings and Preferences, and go to the Plugin Manager. Then from here, just type in Mesh, and then that will bring up this plugin here. Just make sure you click Loaded and then Auto Load, so that will start each time, and then that should bring that tab up over there. Okay, so if I just go ahead and hide the donut and the icing, I'm going to select these 3 cylinders that we've made for our sprinkles, and I'm going to hit this button here on the Mesh tab. That's going to create a mesh network, and you can see it's just duplicated what looks like 3 of the shorter sprinkles out in this direction, in the x-axis. And that's just the start, so we're going to go ahead and tweak this. If you click on your mesh network here, and then come to the attribute editor just down here on the right-hand side, there's a few different tabs. So we have Mesh 1. Now, this is essentially where you can add a bunch of different nodes. Mesh is node-based, and all of these have very different things that they do. They do look a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, we're not really going to be using too many of these today. The one we're looking for right now, because obviously we only have the short sprinkle, and we want all the 3 sprinkles that we've just made. So how do we do that? We can go to ID, add ID node. Okay, and you'll now see that it's changed. So now we have all 3 of our sprinkles. We have the short one here, the curved one, and the long one. Alright, but that's all great, but how do we actually get that onto our mesh, onto our donut? So let's go ahead and unhide the donut. Okay, come back to your mesh network, and then go to this node here, mesh distribute. So the distribution type by default is just set to linear, but if you click this drop down, there's a whole bunch of different options, but the one we're looking for is mesh. Okay, and you might have figured out where we're going with this. We're going to hold down middle mouse click on the outliner in the icing, drag that over to the input mesh, and just drop it into this box here. And you can see now what's happened is it's put our sprinkles on top of the icing. We've got one down here, one up here, and one up here, okay? Now, if I were to drag this number of points, by default it's just 3, and if we had 6 sprinkles it'd be 6, so this number of points adjusts to however many input meshes you put in. We did 3 sprinkles, so we have 3 points. But we can adjust this. If I increase this up to something like 100, you can see now we have a lot more sprinkles on top of our donut. Okay, we can... Unfortunately, the slider here only goes up to 100, but we can also type something in manually. You know, I could type this, put in 1,000, and then we have a bajillion different sprinkles. Okay, so this is how we would do this, but if I go ahead and just select the icing, and then the mesh here that's created by Mesh, and just isolate that, you can see it's adding a bunch on the inside of the icing, and you wouldn't do that, right? You would sprinkle them on top. So how do we get around this? So if I just press Control 1 again to unisolate everything, I'm just going to select the icing, okay? I'm going to duplicate it, just press Control 1 to isolate that for a moment, and I'm going to go to Face Select mode in the modeling toolkit, and I'm just going to click one of these, then Shift click and delete this entire string of faces here, okay? And then we'll just make sure that we've got on all of those, make sure to do the interior one here too, and then we can delete this interior set of faces. Probably get rid of some of these too. Okay, now the reason why we're doing this is because we don't want to have sprinkles appearing on the underside. We only want them on the top side. So if we instead press Control 1 again to unisolate, okay, come back to your mesh network, go to the attribute editor, and under the input mesh, instead of just taking the icing, let's take this new icing one that we made and just pop that into the input mesh. What that will now do is, if we now isolate these two, you can see they're only appearing on the outside of the icing, okay? No longer on the inside. Then we can just hide this additional icing that we made, because we don't need that at the moment. But make sure to keep it for the time being, so that this can stay connected. Okay, so that's all well and good, but everything's looking a bit same, right? It's all going in one direction, everything's going in a straight line, things are kind of clumping together, and it looks a bit weird. So how can we make this look better? We'll come back to the mesh network, we'll come to Mesh 1 tab, and we're going to add a random node here, okay? Just click that, and then go to Add Random Node. And that's going to make everything sort of explode. Now, the reason why that's happened is because if you look at the right-hand side in your attribute editor, you can see we have a bunch of different inputs. So we have the position in X, Y, and Z, the same for rotation and scale. So by default, there's going to be a value of 1 in the position for X, Y, and Z, just to do a bit of randomness right off the bat. So if we were to just zero all these out with a slider, it will go back to normal. Okay? But you can see here, if I start adjusting some of these, it's starting to randomly propagate them out into the x-axis. The trick with this is to have like pretty low values, at least for the position, because otherwise things are going to very, very quickly float off of your donut like this, and that's not what we want. But some of the best things that we can take, that we can use here are the scale and rotation. So if I were to just, maybe add some random rotation into some of these, that's now going to make the sprinkles look a little bit more randomly placed. Okay. Maybe after introducing a bit of rotation, we can also do some scale. I don't want to do too much with this. Maybe we'll just do 0.1 in each. Just to introduce a little bit of offsetting. Sometimes I like to turn on absolute scale off and turn on uniform scale just to add a bit more difference. I'm thinking as well these sprinkles might be a bit too big, so if we want to reduce the size of these overall, we can actually select all of our original sprinkles. They'll be hidden at the moment. Mesh just does that whenever you create a mesh network, and if we just come back here and maybe reduce the size of these down to 0.7, it's going to go ahead and actually update all of those sprinkles, and that looks a bit more reasonable. So I'm liking this a little bit more, but things still look a bit sparse in places. There's a few too many down here. I'm not too fond of that. So we'll come back to the Mesh Distribute node. And under this Distribute section, there's a tick box here called Use Face Area. If you just turn that on, it's going to slightly more evenly distribute sprinkles for us in a little bit more of an even pattern. So this is looking a bit better. If you don't like how things seem to just be sticking out in random angles, again, just go ahead and play with the random node here until things look a bit more reasonable. You could just get rid of the rotation altogether, but I would encourage you to have a little bit, at least in one of the axes, just so things don't look so perfect, right? Even if it's just a bit like that. Okay. Something else as well you can change is the transformation space. By default, it'll be set to world. If you want things to lie a little bit better on the icing, just change that to local as well. You can see now that even though we add rotation, it's kind of just sitting a little bit better on top of things. And that looks a bit more natural to me, I think. Okay, so once you're happy with your sprinkles and you don't really intend to make any more changes, what you can do is just select the mesh that's been created by Mesh, bit of a mouthful, and then just press Ctrl-D to duplicate it. Then once you're done and you don't want to use the Mesh network anymore, make sure you save at this point. If you want to save a new file, that's okay, because after this step you won't be able to go back. We can go ahead and delete the Mesh network, and then we now just have our sprinkles on top. For the time being, I'm not going to, because I like to just keep that intact. One thing I would also make sure you don't do is don't go to delete all history, because if I were to do that, sometimes that will remove the mesh network, okay? So I would encourage you not to do that while you're working on this, until you're happy that it's all done. But yeah, that's how you can very, very quickly add sprinkles to the top of your icing. It doesn't work quite as well as it does with Blender's geometry nodes. They're just a lot more powerful. You might be able to do it with something like Bifrost, but that's for another tutorial. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. That's a brief intro to Mesh and how to add sprinkles to your donut, and I'll see you in the next part tomorrow, where we look at actually adding some shading and some textures to our donut. Thank you very much for watching.